I'm going to talk about dialect study and samples. And first of all, let's just talk about studying dialects and why we might want to do this. I can think of three reasons. There are probably more. One of them, though, is historical linguistics. So, if you're interested in how languages change and how languages change over time, then studying dialects may be a very interesting thing to do. Next is what's called sociolinguistics, which is the study of language and society. And in society, society is about people. People speak language, and there's a connection between the way people speak and the language people speak and some social issues. So, if you're interested in how society works, then studying dialects may be a very interesting way to do this. The other or another reason to study dialects is if you're interested in universal grammar. This is the idea that all languages follow the same underlying rules of grammar. And if you believe this, then studying languages is a good way to find what those universal rules might be and find examples to show this. So, those are a few reasons of why to study dialects. Next is how to study dialects. Well, first you need to find subjects, find people who speak those dialects. Then you need to get them to speak and then somehow record their speech. And that's the first step towards studying the dialects. So, finding subjects. How do you find subjects? Who, if you want to study a dialect, who do you think you should be listening to? Who should you be finding? How old would they be? What gender would you choose? What profession or what other criteria would you think about when you're looking for examples in order to study a dialect? The traditional approach then is what is sometimes called norms as an abbreviation. N stands for non-mobile, O is old, R is rural, and M is men. Why norms? Well, I guess the idea is if you're studying a dialect is you want to know what the original language in that place is. So you're going to try to find old people who have lived there probably their whole life. And if you look for men tend to change the way they speak less than women. So if you try to find old men in the countryside, and they're usually smaller communities, people who've stayed and lived in the same place, then you'll get an idea of what the original dialect for that place was. Of course, there are some problems with this approach. One of them is, what about women? We're missing half the population. Men and women probably speak differently, so if you just listen to men, you're not hearing how people speak. How about young people? Young people speak differently. Are we interested in the way young people speak? And what about city dwellers? Most people in most countries live in cities. So if we just listen to people in the countryside, we're going to miss a lot of the population. And how about new residents? So, for example, immigrants. Are we interested in the way people speak? People who come into communities, people who've moved from other countries. We probably are interested in all of these people. So next, then, how do you get a sample? Well, one thing you can do is give a list. Here's a list of words. Please read the words on the list. You could show a picture to the subject and ask them to describe what's in the picture. You could ask direct questions. You could ask indirect questions. There are maybe problems with each of these approaches. If you give people a word list, it may be that they don't use some of these words in their dialect, and the word in their dialect, they would use a different word for the things on your word list. If you show pictures, you may not get the right language if you're looking for a particular particular word. And direct questions. The subject may try to get the correct answer and may not give a natural answer. You're trying to find a natural example of them speaking in their dialect, but they may be trying to get the right answer, which may not be a natural part of their dialect. And this comes down to a problem or a couple of problems with interviewing. Once you start interviewing somebody, if you're interviewing a subject as the interviewer, you will influence each other. So the subject will start to speak a bit more like the interviewer, and the interviewer will start to speak a bit more like the subject. So you're by doing an interview, you're actually changing the way someone speaks. And you may find that they try to speak more slowly or more clearly to be easy to understand. Or the opposite may happen. They may try to, if you're trying to pick up their dialect and record their dialect, they may try to exaggerate the way they speak. They may speak faster, and they may speak less clearly. So that's a problem with interviewing. The traditional approach, an example, may be going to ask somebody, you sweeten tea with, and hope that they will say the word sugar without you having to say the word and influencing the way they'll pronounce it. Or what do you say to a caller at the door if you want him to enter? I would say, come in. Different people in different dialects may use a different answer. Then later in the traditional approach, the researcher would write down phonetically, you maybe using something like the IPA, the way that the words sound. Problems then with this is there's no grammar. You're providing all the grammar. There's not very much intonation. There's not a lot of social context or lexical context. You don't have an idea of who they're talking to. And usually people don't just speak in single words. People speak in longer stretches of speech. And this is a criticism of the traditional approach, and a recommendation that if you're researching a dialect, you need to try to get people to speak in a relaxed way, probably having a conversation and a continuous conversation. You should try and get examples of everyday language, and also look for the way, as well as looking for the way that different people speak differently. Within the same person will probably speak differently in different situations, so we should be looking for variability within an individual. So there was a kind of, in the 1960s, there was a change in practice from the traditional way of studying dialects to a more socio-linguistic approach. There was a rise of the study of socio-linguistics of society and language, as there was a interest in social problems often happening in cities in the West, and people realized there was a connection between the language that people used and the social situation and some social problems. So at the same time, there were a couple of technological advances. One of them was the tape recorder. So it became quite easy to get a cheap tape recorder, and you could then record what people were speaking. You could record a much longer session, much longer conversation without getting tired, and it was more accurate than writing down. When you're writing down what people are saying, you may make mistakes in the transcription, but if you have a tape recording, that's probably more accurate. Later then, from the 1980s, it became possible to buy computers which help with processing data, so you can look at much bigger amounts of data. So who was researching and where were they researching? So in the 60s and 70s, there was some research of urban population, so the city of New York and Detroit in the United States, the city of Norwich in the UK. Researchers started to look at whole communities, not just individual people. and they could look at different ages, and both men and women, and also starting to look at different ethnic groups, so groups of immigrants within cities. So, as an example, this is kind of a traditional dialect study of the pronunciation of the a sound in la or the r sound in last, depending on where you're from and which pronunciation you're using. So this is a map of England, and we can see on the map in the north of England, it's an a, it's a short a sound. In the south of England, it's an r sound, an r or an a, and there's one area where it's an a sound. This is a traditional dialect approach, so there's a clear line, and if you're on this side of the line, it's an a, and if you're on this side, it's an r. More recently, then, this is a more recent research, which instead of looking at this is a line, and on this side, this is the way everybody speaks, this looks at how often each different pronunciation is used. So we can see from this in the north, many places in the north of England, everybody is using a short a sound. If you look at this area around London in the southeast, everybody is using an r sound. And in many other places, there's one preferred or one more common pronunciation, but it's not 100%. So different people speak differently, and some people may use both an a and an r depending on who they're talking to. Another example of a recent study is looking at L vocalization in East Anglia. This is a feature of Cockney English, of East London English. So instead of saying table, it becomes table, so that the L becomes a vowel. It stops being an ol sound and becomes an sound. And this study was in East Anglia. East Anglia is in the east of England, this part here. And this study looked at, first of all, at older speakers, and whether, for the word feel, whether they're saying feel with a ul at the end or feel with L vocalization. And this was their findings this is 2005. And you can see there's in the south of this area, 50 to 75% of people are saying feel. And in the north, less than 10%, so more than 90% are saying feel. So we can see there's a kind of gradation. Among younger speakers, then, it's a different picture. Right up to here, over 75% of people are saying feel, and 50 to 75% around here, over 75% in this area, and 20 to 50% up here. So we can see there's like a wave. This pronunciation is moving from London and is spreading further north. So as people get younger, they're more likely to speak in this different way. They're more likely to change the L to a vowel. In conclusion from that, this is a feature of what's known as estuary English, which is a kind of new standard English in England, in the UK, which is spreading from London and moving further north. So what should you study then? You should study continuous speech, not just single words. You should try and look at different contexts. So what kind of language is used at home? What language is used at school, in different settings? How do people change the way they speak? And instead of looking at this is the way people speak, we should really be looking at what different ways do people speak, and how often do they use each of these different pronunciations or these different words or different grammars. And we should really be looking at how people, not just how different people speak differently, but within a particular person, how do they change the way they speak. So yes, so your homework then. I'd like to try to find some samples of your dialect, or a dialect that you're in Japanese or your language that you're interested in. And where will you look? What will you look for? The best place to look probably is going to be YouTube. So, or if you know another video site, that may be okay. But I suspect YouTube will have lots of examples of any dialect. So, what kind of people are you going to look for? What kind of situations? When you're searching on YouTube, you need to write something in the search engine. What do you think you should be writing? First of all, who then? So, probably I would not recommend actors as being good examples of dialects, unless they're acting and their character in a TV show or film is somebody from a local area with a local dialect. National politicians, again, probably they're professional speakers, and they probably try to speak in the standard language. As do teachers. Teachers are probably not very good examples of dialects because teachers try to speak a standard, clear, easy to understand language. Probably not YouTubers. Again, YouTubers are trying to be easy to understand, so they will change the way they speak to suit their audience. So probably not YouTubers. If possible, try to find people talking to each other and talking about something. Not. I don't want to hear people talking about the dialect. I'd like to hear people talking in the dialect. Sports people may be good. Maybe good examples of dialects. There are probably other people that you can think of. Maybe there's somebody you know who speaks a dialect, the dialect that you want to find a sample of. Can you find a person you know? You could put the place name, but try to find some genuine. Try to find some genuine samples, not stereotypes, but some real example of people speaking a dialect in a natural situation, not trying to speak the dialect. So when you're looking at the sample, try and check that you've got a decent sample. Check who is speaking, where are they from, are they really a person from this dialect group, and listen to the way they speak, and does it sound right to you? And then also, if it's YouTube, you can check the comments. If there are comments saying this sounds strange, or this doesn't sound right, then that may help you to choose and decide you may not have the best sample. So good luck. See you later.